Listen, I know you're Elvis.
I was a big fan of Elvis's. I liked watching him dance, and I liked watching him in the movies. I wanted to be one of those pretty girls in the movies that Elvis dug.
I think that when you have such an amazing performer who's an icon, a legend, and he dies, people do not want to let go of that.
I'm not trying to hurt your feelings, Mr. Half. I'm merely trying to give you a reality check.
I tell you what, Bruce Campbell has got Elvis down.
I think it's fun to play someone like him because he was such a big cultural icon and a just pop culture character.
You know, Bruce's performance is definitely one for the ages. He's Elvis. I mean, there's just no doubt about it.
I think that this is a very insightful film. Even through all the laughs and sometimes ridiculous things that go on in the rest home, there's an underlying darkness and depth there.
Be camera! See camera!
Is the film a drama? Is it a comedy? Or is it horror? Sometimes I'd fill out these festival applications and I'd ponder that for an hour, not knowing which box to check.
It's an interesting question, what is Bubba Ho-Tep? And when you try and tell people, you can give them the long version or the short version. The short version, the TV guide slugline is it's a redemptive Elvis mummy picture.
What genre really is it? Comedy, scary, camp? I'm not quite sure, but it's a fun movie to be in.
The Elvis in this movie is very contemplative. And so there's a lot of it, you know, that going on too. So it's not really a comedy per se.
The idea was so crazy and wild that you had to say, well, somebody's crazy. Is it me? It certainly was a challenge. It's not something you would meet every day.
It's a horror film because there's a mummy. You know, and how can you have a film that's not horror with a mummy in it, especially a soul-sucking 4,000-year-old one? Yet, I think that at its core, Bubba Ho-Tep is a very serious drama.
It's not a plot that you're going to see on a movie while you're taking an airplane flight. It's just too weird of a story. And then what the hell was I going to get into next?
The next question is Bruce's.
Originally, I had this idea. I'd watched one of the Mummy movies. I believe it was the Boris Karloff one, and I believe the mummy was called Ho-Tep. I could be wrong on that, but I remember watching some mummy movie, and I said, well, you know, that was an East Texas mummy. It'd be Bubba Ho-Tep. And I thought, you know, that's not a bad idea, Bubba Ho-Tep.
I first found out about Joe Lansdale. I was in a bookshop in Los Angeles, and I asked the clerk what was new and cutting edge in horror, and he took me to the Joe Lansdale section and said, you should read Joe. His books always have a high body count. Kind of intrigued me. I bought a copy of one of Joe's books, took it home and read it, and I just loved his work.
I'd always been interested in all these Elvis sightings too. I just thought that was phenomenal that people, this man's dead and people, I saw him at the Walmart, you know, he was buying a pocket comb. And I thought, this is incredible. And you'd go in, you'd see these things like the Weekly World News, like, you know, statue of Elvis found on Mars or something like that. And so I had my mind about these Elvis sightings, and I had about the Mummy movie. And then I was asked by Paul Salmon, who was doing an anthology called The King is Dead, to write an Elvis story. And I went, click.
A couple of years later, I found a Joe Lansdale short story collection in the bookstore. And I opened it up, and there on the dust jacket it read, Elvis Battles Mummy. And it just jumped out at me. Then when I saw the title, Bubba Ho-Tep, how cool was that? I bought the book, took it home and read it, and immediately realized that this would make a great film. In trying to raise the funding for Bubba Ho-Tep, I showed it around to a couple of studios, and generally the response from the Hollywood big shots was pretty damn typical. They despised everything that I thought was great about the story. And they couldn't get over the fact that I wanted to make a movie that would be 90 minutes of two old geezers in a rest home. They said there's no way that our target youth demographic is going to sit through that.
I got the call from Don at that point, and I read the script, and the financing wasn't in place yet, but I said, well, congratulations, Don. You know, this is the weirdest script ever written, I think.
The typical Hollywood movie costs somewhere between $50 and $70 million, and you're really talking on orders of magnitude about 1%. We had about 1% of the typical Hollywood movie budget. Yet, it was enough to do this story if we could just call in a few favors. The first time I saw Bruce Campbell was at a Fangoria convention, and he just wowed the fans. It was really amazing. This was before the Bruce Mania had really started with the Army of Darkness and all of that. The way that he energized that crowd, it was just phenomenal. And I always remembered that.
It's a very weird script. And right from the go-get, it's launching right into Elvis in a home with cancer on his penis, and it's pus-filled, and I thought, oh my God, what am I getting into?
He bears a passing resemblance to Elvis. He's, he's got the dark hair, he's got the chiseled good looks. You know, his chin's a little bigger than Elvis, but definitely something we could work with.
Well, the key factor for me in doing this part was an issue of the penis, because and the script is very lurid how it describes he has a cancerous growth at the end of his penis, and how it's being lubed up by the nurse and this and that. And I thought, well, let me find out, before I say yes or no, let me find out where Don's coming from. So I remember calling him up and going, Don, I got one question for you, pal.
Don, you're not going to show it, are you? And I said, show what? He said, you know, show it.
Are you going to show the penis? He goes, no, I'm not going to show the penis. I went, then I'm in. It's hard to say what my agents had, what their reaction was to the script, but I know that it was just not good. In their mind, this was like an Elvis mummy cancer on your penis movie, and they're like, what? They didn't get it. They didn't get it, flat out. And from, as I understand it from talking to Don, that Ossie Davis, his agents said no too.
This particular character, or any character if you're an actor, has to believe in himself and in his mission in toto. And so playing Jack Kennedy, I just truly believed that I was Jack Kennedy, and they had done a dirty deed, and I was trying to get back.
Ossie's a legend. I mean, not only is he an actor, he's a director, a writer, a historian, a social activist. I mean, you're talking about a man who's a legend, and he's probably one of the few actors in Hollywood who could bring an 80-year-old JFK to life and make you believe that he's really
a black JFK with sawdust in his head. Certainly that's something that would give you pause.
Oh my goodness, when I heard Ossie Davis was going to be playing the other lead in the film, I was just thrilled. Just to even be on celluloid in the same film with Ossie Davis is a thrill.
We needed him for a bunch of reasons. One, to give credibility not only to the movie, but to the part. Because he's playing a psycho in a weird sort of way. And if you cast kind of a wild-eyed, freaky character, I don't think you'd believe him. But here you get Ossie Davis, you know, the man who gave the eulogy for Malcolm X. You believe what he says, and he has an earnestness to him that is hard to manufacture.
When the movie premiered in Detroit, which is where I'm from, a lot of my friends and family came out to see it, and there was just this sigh of excitement when they saw him come up on the screen. It was like, oh, I just love Ossie Davis, you know, and he's still a good-looking man.
We shot the film over a 30-day period in a location just outside of Los Angeles in Downey, California. We were able to get the run of an entire abandoned hospital campus. It included a place to shoot the actual rest home. We had the hallways, the corridors. It even had enough room for us to create the trailer park where we did the explosion sequence.
One of Don's biggest assets as a filmmaker is that he can get the most production value out of every penny, let alone every dollar. It's quite amazing.
I know that Don had a great time with this picture, and this was a real labor of love. And by the way, not to mention, a real independent picture.
A lot of these low-budget movies, they're shot in 18 days, 16, 14 days, 12 days. And so Don came back with, he said, I'm shooting for 6 weeks. And I said, then count me in, because I knew that he was serious about making something that wasn't all about how many shots you could get in a day or how many minutes of footage you could get in a day.
Action. I'm gonna squish you cockroach.
Cut it.
The first third of the movie, Elvis never gets out of bed. I thought that was an advantage, really, and I remember the first couple of days of shooting, I was going, am I ever going to get out of this bed? It was just one bed scene after the next. You know, we had been filming one particular sequence for a long time, and I had to go to the bathroom, but the camera setup was very complicated. The lights were all around the bed. I couldn't get out. And I said, Don, give me the pan. He's like, what? I said, yeah, just give me the bedpan. I mean, my character would do it, and this wasn't number one.
Elvis's barbecue accident was really a one-take deal. We had to gut his trailer and rig it up with explosives and gasoline. I got to credit Bruce for having the nerve to put himself in that situation and to stand right next to the trailer and then walk away as the camera started rolling, because at any time there could have been an accident and the whole trailer park could have gone up.
I have to say, for me, the appeal of working on low-budget movies is that everyone who's there on the set wants to be there. I know that in my experience, we've had to do that a lot of times, and something like Army of Darkness, you'd go to someone who was only an art director and go, you know, you could be a production designer. Oh, really? I was pleased that Don was putting his money, at least I thought, in the right places, because he sure as hell didn't pay me anything. Some of the other actors who played Elvis, David Keith in Heartbreak Hotel, he developed a saying. He'd go, when the camera cuts, the air conditioning turns on, okay? The camera cut, air conditioning on. Because he was sweating his ass off in those suits. And when I first heard the story, I'm like, ah, you crybaby, shut up. And then I found myself going, camera cuts, air conditioning goes on. But then I went, oh, we don't have any air conditioning. I guess I couldn't pull that Star Trip.
The concert scene where Sebastian Haff is performing in front of a crowd. You know, having limited resources, we couldn't hire a lot of extras, and so we managed to get about 100 people to show up one dark and cold night. And it was a challenge because when we weren't looking, they were leaving and the crowd kept getting smaller and smaller. So thank God we started with the big scenes where you could see the big crowd, and then as the night wore on, probably at the end of the night, we had maybe 10 or 15 extras left. We had 3 pretty radical stunt sequences in Bubba Ho-Tep. The first one involved Elvis throwing his lighter at Bubba Ho-Tep and lighting his head on fire.
Sorry, man.
And we don't want anybody to get hurt or anywhere near the vicinity when we shoot, except for these 2 gentlemen. He's got goggles on to protect his eyes, so that nobody here could get burned.
Once the burn is started, I have to rely heavily on a safety person to guide me through the stunt and tell me which way to go, right or left, and when to fall down and when to hit my marks. There's a wall of flame in front of my face, so I can't see anyway. I'm pretty much blind.
B-speed, action!
Sorry, man.
Left! Left! Forward! And fall!
So I lit his face on fire, and it's always, once you get past being nervous about it, it's kind of fun to throw your lighter and light someone on fire.
Elvis is fighting the mummy on the wheelchair. They go to the edge of the cliff and they have to tumble and roll all the way to the bottom down to the creek. It was basically Bob Ivy in mummy costume and a dummy of Elvis. And we got a couple guys to push the thing at full speed, and that hit the edge of the cliff and went flying over the edge, and we get the shot of the wheelchair flying through the air. The most amazing stunt in the film, though, is the full body burn that Bob Ivy does. when Elvis tortures him at the end of the film. He was just an inferno of fire, and he had to maneuver himself over to where his mark was to then fall into the creek.
Body burn is a very dangerous stunt. It gets very hot very quickly. If you get burned, it's quick and it's permanent, and you have to know what you're doing. You can't just freak out and go running all over the set.
Your soul-sucking days are over, amigo.
Relax! Fall! You're out! And cut!
At the beginning, take kind of a straight line this way, and if you can, make a sharp turn and go straight. And then just as he gets lined up in this position, then I want Elvis to step out kind of with a flourish, okay? So let's give that a try.
Here we go. And John, roll it.
All right, quiet, please. And action.
Sitting in a makeup chair for 2.5 hours, you get all the grumpiness you'd ever need, and you feel like an old man because you're tired.
What makes a successful makeup is the less is more, especially when you deal with an actor that has so much mobility and articulation in his face. And we didn't want to cover Bruce with all these appliances and all this heavy makeup so he wasn't able to perform. We had a chin piece as to cover that little scar that Bruce had. He really wanted that to not be a main feature because Elvis didn't have it. We also had a nose, a prosthetic nose on Bruce. And then we had jowl pieces that I believe ran alongside his nose, around his jawline, and then back up.
The schedule that Bruce Campbell had to work was really arduous. He would arrive 2 hours and 45 minutes before anyone else did. We were still sleeping in bed when Bruce arrived at the set.
We're at the end of the process here. This is the finished product without the Elvis glasses man.
Yeah.
Bruce, to me, is one of my favorite subjects, and I feel that nobody wears makeup the way Bruce Campbell wears makeup. I mean, he really sells it 100%. He doesn't let it inhibit his performance. He uses it as a tool. It's just one more thing in his bag of tricks that, you know, he needs to develop that character.
The film does have a poignant way of touching on how older people in our society are cast aside.
A lot of people mentioned to me that they like the fact that the movie had two older people as heroes in the movie. And that was exciting to them because our culture is so youth-oriented.
And in a culture like ours that's slightly obsessed with the idea of youth, and we tend not to make place at the table at all sometimes for those who are not necessarily still young.
And it's a pretty grim situation to imagine yourself being stuck in an old folks' home, stuck in bed between JFK and the Mummy and all the activity that goes with them. It gives Elvis a reason to live. It gives him a reason to get himself out of bed.
This film is an ode to old people. It reflects something that's very true. Older people in this society are invisible, and how quickly we forget.
I've passed my prime. I mean, I'm 86, and if I haven't said what I got to say by now, I think it's a bit late, you know. So I'm sort of playing out the string and being involved as the occasions arise. But my big moment, or the moment when I made my statement as an actor, as a writer, or even as a director, is past. I'm not looking for that. I'm not seeking it at all. I had my chance. I made the best of it. I'm highly satisfied. And trying to find a dignified way to get off the stage without bumping into the furniture.
The crew tends to dwindle as we get down to those last couple days. I think the second to last day we wound up at this water park outside of Los Angeles that had an Egyptian theme. And then ultimately the last day of shooting was just myself and my son Andy in my backyard. We had a little wading pool, and we needed to do a shot at the creek bed. We needed an insert shot of the bus license plate. So just the two of us actually ended up shooting that last shot. Bubba Ho-Tep became a cult hit on the festival circuit.
At the premiere for the movie, seeing the crowds and hordes of fans that were just lined up waiting for this movie to come out.
It was pretty stunning. The lines were out on the street. They were down the street.
We arrived at the screening at the Uptown Cinema, 1,000 seats, and they had turned away 400 people.
And then it played throughout Europe and throughout the United States and in Asia. It's played everywhere in festivals all over the world, and always the responses has been great.
Under all of the weirdness, there was a strange sentimental side to it. We don't always have to make movies where it's with blood going and, you know, little balls sucking, you know, smashing into people's heads and limbs flying. It doesn't always have to be the case.
It was an amazing thing to see this picture cut together and to hear the reaction from the crowd. It was incredible. They got all the nuances. They laughed their heads off. People were practically falling out of their seats.
And it was really gratifying, I have to say, more than anything, to see Bubba play in art house multiplexes. And Bubba Ho-Tep, a redemptive Elvis mummy picture, is right there. And to me, that was the final victory.
The response to the film in general has just been overwhelming.
They loved the movie. It was really a dream come true.
Mummy is a very dry occupation. There's not a lot of chance for much humor. No humor. But boy, I love to suck on souls.
Where'd old Bubba Ho-Tep go? Where'd he come from? How the hell did he get here?
Making The Mummy wasn't a very easy task. One of the challenges of any modestly budgeted horror film is to create believable effects. We didn't have millions of dollars to create digital mummy effects. We had to do it the old-fashioned way, with rubber. And the making of Bubba Ho-Tep required us to call in quite a few favors, and one of the biggest ones we called in was with K&B Effects. We were so lucky to get the top effects company in Hollywood to sign on to create our title character, Bubba Ho-Tep, the Mummy.
When Don came to us, you know, he had a lot of ideas about what he wanted the mummy to look like. First, he wanted it to be very emaciated and thin, and that's really tough to do when you have, unless you have a really thin actor. And you know, Bob was pretty thin, but we had to accentuate certain parts of the body by darkening in sections to give it the illusion of it being a total thin skeletal look.
They were really genuinely excited about helping us with the project, and basically did the project at cost. Led by Bob Kurtzman, the team at K&B Effects created a fabulous mummy suit. It was a costume.
So we ended up taking measurements of Bob Ivy and finding a body form that was very close to his body in size and everything. And then we did head and hands casts of him.
K&B started by doing a mold of my head in order to sculpt the mask. The mask took about 30 minutes to put on, and they had to glue it down around my eyes.
As far as the body, we had a group of foam fabricators, and they would pull these pieces out of skeletal parts that we had existing molds of, and we trimmed them up, and the girls in the foam fabrication department would glue these pieces to a bodysuit, a spandex bodysuit that we had on the body form. Then after that, I took the body and spatulated foam latex all over the whole thing and let it kick off and gel, and then textured it and kind of sculpted all the wrinkles and rotted flesh look to the thing. And then we began the painting process so that the thing would look like it had like recessed pockets of missing flesh, and you could see the rib cage and everything.
Clothing was very important to Bubba Ho-Tep. His shirt, his Western shirt, was really put on piece by piece. It wasn't a shirt, it never was a shirt. The boots for Bubba Ho-Tep are made out of snakeskin. No cowboy worth his weight in gold would be caught dead without a great pair of snakeskin boots. Bubba Ho-Tep needed a really cool Western cowboy hat. At last, we found the perfect hat. Distressed just perfectly, KB added bones and feathers. And there you have it. My pal, Bubba Ho-Tep.
My first thought whenever seeing the mummy, and the guy, Bob Ivy, who's playing the mummy, is, you poor bastard, because you're trapped under there. And Don's like, hey, Bob, move a foot to your right. No, you idiot, back this way. I mean, not like that, but it was much worse than that.
Bob, I need you to go this way just about an inch.
Right here?
Your right foot this way 1 inch. Good.
Bob was in much more agony and pain than I was with these little red contact lenses in that you might see shooting at night.
Sometimes they were uncomfortable, but that's just part of the game.
And with this full mask on, and I mean, you can't breathe, really. And you're creating your own biosphere in there. And after a while, you're sort of breathing your own essence.
And I know he must have been getting hot inside that thing. Even though he tells me he was cool as a cucumber, I don't believe it.
During the day, it would get a little warm, so it would be hot in the suit. But when we shot at night, I didn't have any problems because it was cold at night. It was actually good to have it on to keep warm.
Bob, good job, man.
Uniform.
Oh. Big check on that, baby.
Dressing Bruce Campbell as Elvis Presley was a real challenge because Elvis Presley was an icon of fashion and a trendsetter, and everything was custom made.
And this was a challenge for the wardrobe department, which was to give Elvis some different looks so it didn't get too tedious.
We got the real jumpsuit company that makes the Elvis jumpsuits. There's only one, there only was, there only will be, that licenses them and makes them, and they're really serious about it.
We are the largest manufacturers of this type of garment for Elvis tribute artists.
To the point where they gave us 3 for the Elvis movie and they had to be sent back.
These guys come to us because we, without tooting our own horn, we're the Rolex of Elvis costumes.
Because it's none of this, Bruce isn't keeping them in his closet.
I worked with BK Enterprises, and Butch over there helped me. He holds the original patterns for the Elvis jumpsuits.
Low-budget movies, you either have to, with a film, you either have to tailor that stuff and make it from scratch, which wasn't going to happen, or you find it. So Shelley did a good job digging all that stuff up, all the cool looks, the leather, the big lapels, because Elvis grew up so dirt poor that it seems like from the second he had a penny, he was always in the coolest suits. You look at those 50s photos of him, they were always looked like tailored, custom suits, and I think he just never went back. He went, I'm never gonna be simple or ordinary again. So you never saw him in jeans or tennis shoes. They were always boots and Nehru jackets and the powder blues. And some of it was the styles of the day, but it seemed like he just took it and added steroids to it. It just made it crazier and crazier. The thing about them is they have all the sequins, and you couldn't really wash the suits that well. So performing 3-hour shows in them, I mean, you're gonna sweat, you're gonna stink up those suits. Elvis in the old days, in order to cover up the stench, had to put Brute on him, and he would just dump it on him. So all those scenes where he's going to kiss those chicks and giving all his scarves away, if I was the girl, I'd go, whoa, whoa. It smelled like a combination of, you know, B.O. and Brute.
There was a lot of detail with the Elvis suits. They're lined, the stitching is incredible. Each stud is nailed and hammered in to withstand hours and hours of gyration on the stage, and for our purposes, hours and hours of tumbling and stunts. The sunglasses that we all identify Elvis with, you know, those weren't just Elvis sunglasses. You have to remember, he was in an old folks' home, so they now became his reading glasses. So they became something more than just looking cool in.
The manufacturing process starts out with us making the garments from a lot of Elvis Presley's original patterns, his jumpsuit patterns, some of his original studding patterns. Here are two of the garments that were originally made for the Bubba Ho-Tep movie. This one was the black pinwheel suit. This one was designed off of one of Elvis's suits that was called the Tiffany suit. And the reason why Elvis called it the Tiffany suit was because it had so many jewels. And of course, what suit that's used by Bruce Campbell could be complete without the signature of Bruce Campbell in the back of it? Of course, we have the black crushed velvet jacket. Some people have called it the Nixon jacket. The black shirt here is the one that he wore underneath that jacket.
To make Bruce look heavier for the heavier Elvis scenes, he wore a latex fat suit. And it was a one-piece outfit that you slip into. It was shorts. It didn't come all the way down his leg. And then it snapped in the back, and it had a big belly, much like a maternity stunt outfit that somebody would wear. And then the fat Elvis suit would go on over that. And then you had the big belt that would go on over that.
I would put it on. It was like putting pantyhose on. And I'd put it up over my arms, and then I would have to get someone to zip me up the back. It was the most embarrassing part. Can you send someone in and zip up my fat suit?
One of the side benefits of the padded jumpsuit was that it probably kept him pretty well protected during some of those tumbles and pretty warm during some of those tough night shoots.
Elvis wore the jumpsuits because I think the power that he had over his fans really terrified him. And if he dressed up in a costume, if he wore a cape, it was almost like he was poking fun at himself. And it actually brought some sanity to the whole situation. And that's, I think, why he started wearing that kind of outfit. For our film, it was wonderful that he wore the jumpsuits, because wearing the jumpsuits, it was almost like a superhero costume. You know, when you got Elvis going out to battle a mummy, you should dress like a superhero.
It's great to have a character that is that flamboyant to play, you know? I kept going, Don, come on, give me some more rings. Haven't you got any more rings?
For most of the shooting schedule, Bruce was in his fat suit and in his pajamas lying in bed or in his fat Elvis outfit. The very few times he was in his performance suits and young, he looked absolutely fantastic. And for me, as a costume designer, it was very gratifying to see him look so handsome and so incredible. Those were the best days of shooting.
Sitting here with Brian Tyler, who composed the score for Bubba Ho-Tep. Brian, what really attracted me to your work was Daniel Schweiger, who worked as a music supervisor on the project, had given me a copy of the Six String Samurai score, which I just thought was so cool and so wonderfully guitar-based. It had a real organic feel to it. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Six String Samurai, I mean, was really the first film that was released that I had scored. And instead of going for a traditional score, it was rock and roll, you know.
When you're first watching the film, I mean, well, what's your approach in working in creating a score for a film? I mean, when you see the film, do you find that the ideas come from that very first screening, or does it take some rumination and thinking about it?
On something like Bubba Ho-Tep, even though it's a completely different film than anything I've ever done, it's the same process for me as any film, where you watch the film, and at first I just take it in like an audience member. I try not to think of the music or if there's tent music or whatever. I try to just kind of take it in, so I see how I feel about the movie. So at that point, then I kind of can sit down, and that's when the weird part happens. I watch the film, and all of a sudden the melodies appear in my head. And that's the stage. I don't know how it happens, but somehow it starts kind of coming to you. A few different things. You get overloaded at the beginning of a film. You think of too many things. There's too many themes. And then you pretty much, I sit down and just narrow it down and see what really speaks to me. And then I put off meeting with the director as long as possible till I find that perfect magic, melody. And because, it's always something, and I remember this, you want to meet, you want to hear what's going on. And I know from my experience, I'll know when the light bulb goes off, and it's like I found the theme, hopefully.
How do you create a theme? I mean, do you sit down and noodle at the piano until you come up with something? Does it just come to you in your head?
For me, at least, it comes to me in my head. It's not by sitting down and kind of trying stuff out on the piano or the guitar. It's more reverse engineering what came to me in my head. Okay, it comes in my head, and it's some weird moment. Shower is typical, or driving along. It's always where you're not by an instrument or a piece of paper. You can write it down. So inevitably, you do the types of things where you're driving on the 405 and you call from your cell phone your voicemail and sing it, or something.
You've actually left voicemails to yourself with tunes?
Oh, it's embarrassing. I mean, if you ever heard them, it's like ridiculous. But to me, I know what it is. I know what I'm trying to do. I'm doing like human beatbox over the phone combined with, okay, that section was 4 bars. I'll actually say it to Brian. That's 4 sections of the percussion. Now I'm going to do the guitar. For me, it comes from inside first, and then I try to pick out what's actually in my head. And that's exactly what happened on this film, for all the themes.
You do a range of scores, and I know you've done full orchestral projects and very simple stuff also, but I do know that in this film, that you performed every instrument and performed pretty much everything in the film.
The first time I started tracking overdubbing, I was a kid, and I had a multi-track recorder. I could kind of record over myself. I didn't have a lot of kids in my town when I was real young that played a lot of instruments. There was no garage bands for me yet or anything. So I would lay down the drums first, then I'd go over to the keyboard or the bass and lay that down, then record the guitar, and I'd put on some, that kind of became this one-man band thing. So actually from my roots, before I really conducted orchestras, which I do in most of my films now, it's actually orchestral, and then maybe 1 out of 10 films or something, I get to do something like this.
Well, one of the key components of the movie is there's a heavy Egyptian theme. There's vocalizations in there, Egyptian lyrics, are there?
The Egyptian thing, it's me in there. I sing a lot on this soundtrack. It's a film that needed to be wise with its budget, but I think that inspired me to be more creative. And for me to actually go and, figure out Egyptian words and these things and put them into the film and do these crazy vocal techniques and things, it was pretty challenging. I mean, it stretched the limits of what I can do. But on top of that, using a lot of Eastern, Egyptian, and Indian and techniques in music creates kind of an otherworldly thing. For Western ears, certainly it melds together. A movie like this, as funny as it is, and is comedic and crazy with all the elements, it's also a tribute to Elvis, and it's very much, you know, honoring his legacy as much as it is, let's have fun with it, you know, so since we had kind of the wackiness on screen, actually the music isn't like wacky at all. It actually plays very straight, you know, and it's that contrast that I think that, you know, on those movies where you see music hopefully working with the film, that's what you try to do, you know, you try to find a way to have it speak in a way that is really organic to the film. Well, let me ask you, Don, when you're cutting your movie, or shooting it, are you thinking of the music at that time? I hope so.
Absolutely. I mean, I throw myself at the mercy of my composer to bail me out of problems, always. And certainly with Bubba Ho-Tep, you know, there are, you know, to creating the mood and also to help to create the tone. Because, you know, the thing is that people do come into the movie with preconceived notions. They think it's going to be something really wacky and really crazy, which it is. But I always, from the beginning with the short story, I felt that there had to be a lot of heart, and it's so important to get a connection with the audience to the core of, you know, of Elvis in this predicament. You know, he's a guy who really had so much potential, and in a certain fashion, he's sort of gone to seed, and he has this chance of redemption. And that's what I was looking for. And when, I mean, believe me, I was so thrilled with the way that this score turned sections of the film around that I felt really needed the help. I'd worked with a great composer years ago who unfortunately he's passed on, Fred Myro, and he one of the things he used to always tell me whenever I'd try to ask him to score something that was a little too short or a piece of cue, he would always say to me, that's television. That's a television cue. It's one of those to end to a commercial. You know, you can't put a cue in that's 20 seconds long or 15 seconds long. So it seems to be that during the editing process, when I'm starting to think about music, I'm actually thinking about how we can leave space for music, how we can design it so that it fits, certainly.
I mean, it seems to me, looking at a film, I can watch a film in its raw form without music and tell whether or not there was room left for music while you're shooting it. To me, it seems intentional. You would have shots that would hold for longer than you would usually see. You know, if you're a little bit nervous about your own film, you tend to quick cut and not hold on shots because the music's going to have to carry it. For me, it was great to see that you left room for me to do what I should do.